Scott's School with Principal of the school, Peggy May. First of all, welcome to the journey.
Hi Kevin, how are you?
Very well, thank you. And we always start these by gathering heritage of the person that we sit down with. And I guess you're relatively a newcomer to Albury-Wodonga, aren't you?
Yes, in one way I am, and but also not in another way. And perhaps if I can go back to some of my ancestry and why we're drawn to the northeast. And my father had talked non-stop around the northeast when I was growing up, and his father was born in Beechworth. Oh. So in fact, the Mays came to Beechworth in the 1850s, and there's like 100 years of Mays in Beechworth and the region. And so my grandfather was born in Beechworth and then moved out of Beechworth to join the various wars. He was a soldier, and instead of coming home, he went to Melbourne, and then a whole family of Mays in Victoria down in Melbourne was established, and we lost contact with the Beechworth Mays. And ironically enough, when I came back to Albury and principal at the Scott's School, and I run functions, and every now and again an old chap or old lady will come up and say, my cousin was a May, or in fact wearing a name badge saying, I'm Kath May and you're a relative, and pulling out photos of family reunions when my father, maybe 30 years ago, went to a reunion of Mays, a significant group of Mays now in Narandera. And so, yeah, I feel like I've actually returned home.
Yeah, well, I guess that's probably been almost an educational journey for yourself, has it? To sort of realise how many of your ancestors and, I guess, extended family are still here and around.
Yeah, still finding out, and occasionally raise that with people when I'm down in Beechworth, and they said, oh yes, there's a lot of dead Mays in that cemetery.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to meeting any live cousins around, and that'd be great.
How do you think other people would describe you, Peggy?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kevin, and I asked my own child that and my husband that, and they were very kind, much to my surprise. My daughter said, you're funny, Mum. And my husband said, you're brave and you're smart. My staff might say that I'm a risk taker and quite a strong leader. And interesting, I was standing on a stall in Henty, and one of my staff members was saying, they were talking to some families out that way, and they said, you've got a reputation for being really strong. I said, me? And they said, yeah, you're really strong. I said, oh gosh. But I'm wondering whether that is because I'm quite decisive about what I want to do as a leader. On a different day, if you ask my daughter, she might say, Mum, you're pretty random as well, and just an ordinary person. So all of those things.
So I'd imagine being principal of Scott's School and having been here for 5 or so years, it takes up a fair bit of your time, or more so perhaps when you first came to the job. What do you do with spare time? Do you have much spare time to unwind and give back to the community in other ways? Yeah,
I like to pretend that I did have a really balanced life, but that's not the case. I actually do probably spend about 85 or 90% of my time at work, or thinking about work, or doing work at home now. But I do go to the gym. We've moved out from the school grounds out to Barranduda. The school has traditionally had the principal living on the grounds as a boarding school, and I'm the first principal in 50 years to move off the schoolhouse. And we just found that we needed, as a family, to have a better balance of our own time. So, living out at Barranduda, get to the gym, go walking along the river, and I also have some other interests associated with education, but more about a community base. So I'm a board member of a not-for-profit, which is called the Outdoor Education Group. They're the biggest providers of outdoor education in Australia, and so I do travel around Australia to support that board and the work of that group.
So tell me more about that. How did you get involved with that?
Well, as a teacher, and I've had probably 25 years experience working with the Outdoor Education Group, and so as a teacher went on lots and lots of school trips with kids, and down rivers and up mountains and slidey, wet, leech infested walks with many outdoor education group leaders, and you can see the transformation of young people on those journeys. And I was very inspired, sort of young and late in my 20s perhaps, pretty fit, wanted to be on those programs with young people, and then changed schools and could see lesser programs having lesser impact on people. So would design and engineer new programs and work with the Outdoor Education Group. And then eventually, after probably about 15 years of being very involved in those sorts of things, they invited me onto their board. which I did for 5 years, but then some work took me to Canberra, so I stepped off the board, and now that I'm back in Albury, I have found time to get re-involved with a fantastic board. They've got some, significant business people and some sports legends and people who are really experienced in governance. And so if we can, make a big impact on the lives of young people, that's what we're hoping to do.
And is that part of the aim is to make sure kids are more active and outdoors much more?
Absolutely, and taking safe risks, so that I think young people feel pressure that their profile and their personality is forever on show. So it gives them an opportunity to kind of check out of being completely on show in terms of social media. They don't have to do anything dangerous with alcohol or drugs or their own behaviour. They can take safe risks. They can, walk along a rickety bridge. They can slide down a snowy mountain. They can laugh with their friends, and no one's judging them. So I really think it's a fantastic thing.
What would you consider to be your biggest achievement in life so far?
Well, I think that's a hard question in terms of determining whether it's personal or professional, but I'll take the professional one. I think being a principal of a regional country boarding school, and I arrived here 5 years ago, and the school was really at a tipping point, and it needed to reimagine itself, and there were some big decisions to make, and so I think stabilising the school and reinventing it and taking it forward has probably been, while we're not completely where I want it to be, we're well on the way, and it's exciting to see the journey go forward.
You mentioned then that you've had to make some pretty tough decisions, and maybe unpopular ones, I'd imagine, at times. What's the toughest decision you've had to make?
I think the toughest decision is when you're messing with people's history and their lives. And so, when you come in, it's not just a business decision. It's actually you're a leader of a community, and you get to know people quite personally. And so even though you might say, well, this is an organisational decision I'm making, or this is a clean educational, value add, it's going to affect people. You know that maybe for 10 or 15 years that some staff have been doing things in a particular way and they're very wedded to it and they have a passion for it. Or you know that their livelihood and job and their security in the region is bound up with having a job at your school. So when you change those things, it's a very, the weight of that sits on your shoulders. And so I was faced with, having to do two things that I could have just righted the business of the school and left the educational side for a later date, or I could have, worked on the educational side. But I think the imperative at that time, back in 2014, was to do both at once, and to make any of the business decisions central to supporting the educational outcomes, so that they're not separate things. One's not just about spin, one's not just about money saving, nor is the education so pie in the sky that it has no logic and hasn't got sustainability to it. So doing it together was a huge thing. People still talk about it as that epic year. And some people were very angry. And we had a number of moments where staff, let it rip and let me know what they thought. Sometimes even online, people would pursue me about those decisions. Even now, there's people who have a residue of displeasure and hurt because they, weren't part of the future. They might have been part of the past.
And I guess you've had to make people either adapt to change or make them feel comfortable with adapting to change, or they couldn't deal with the change. How does it feel when it's a personal attack, well, it's your decision, you've made the decision. How does it feel when people, as you said, commenting online and giving their feedback? How do you not take that personally?
Well, I think you do. I think it's very hard to put some sort of Teflon coating over yourself and say nothing sticks. I think it does hurt. Do
you think it would have been different if you're a male?
I think there's an automatic authority that comes with being a male, whereas I think women can be judged like she's a tough woman, whereas I think they'll just say, oh, there might be a strong leader. That doesn't worry me, that sort of judgment.
So what's the worst thing that has ever happened to you?
Well, there's many sort of annoying things or disappointing things or frustrating things or moments of, personal sadness when someone in your family dies and those sorts of things. But I'd have to say, a life-threatening thing was actually being out with a group of young people in the bush. So probably, half a dozen years into my teaching career, I'd built to go on an expedition with this company, Outdoor Education Group, which I'm now a board member of, with 17 Year 11 students, and we were doing a 3-week trip to the top of Mount Kosciuszko. And the idea was that you would ski to the top of it, hit to the summit, travel down through snowshoeing, then hit the top of the Snowy River, and then raft through all the white water, then hit the flat water, get into a canoe, and then hit the surf. And you'd take symbolically an amount of snow with you, and you would tip it into the ocean, and the whole thing would be this extremely transformational milestone for everybody. So the school had done it the year before. This is in a school I worked in Melbourne, and we're up for our second trip. And as in things of this nature, there were still quite a few warts in the planning. And we got caught in a blizzard on the top of Mount Kosciuszko, and we'd mistimed our departure, and we'd overstretched the kids and our staff in terms of their hydration and their food, and we'd mistimed hitting the slopes, and we'd actually headed out just at a point when there was a whiteout warning, and so the group then was under immense stress to ski to a safer point. Darkness, so the whiteness first hit, the group spread out. We were in a long line. I could only see maybe one student in front of me, no one was behind me, I was the last person. And then not only could I not see because of the white, eventually it became dark, and so I was skiing in the dark and I couldn't see anybody or hear anyone, and I was in a blizzard. And then happily, probably hundreds of metres away, I could see just a tiny head torch light, which I skied towards to try and seek safety. And then a student dropped down in front of me and, was collapsing and said, I really can't go any further, and I can't pick up my pack, and I can't get my stocks. And so I used all my residual teacher energy to kind of gather them up and straighten them off. And then they skied straight off and left me in the dark. And then I finally did get to this hut in the blizzard, and we sort of just kept following the light, and then smack straight into the door of a hut for safety. And we had all the kids in there and we were safe. But the story goes on for a long time, but we were there for 5 days. We were kept in this blizzard. We couldn't get out. We'd actually, we got to the summit and back, actually cleared for half a day, and we thought we were going to get out, but we didn't. It was one of the biggest blizzards in Jindabyne in a decade. A staff member and I decided that we had one tent that had been supported by a snow cave, that we would spend the final night of this 5th night in that snow cave, because we couldn't stand the noise and the shouting, and the kids were very excited because we got a radio call to say that the skidoos were coming up to rescue us. And of course, in that tent, to tell it long story short, it got very silent in the middle of the night, and I thought, oh great, the blizzard's over, and then discovered that a drift had dropped onto the tent and we had been buried alive. So I woke up my companion and had to unzip the tent, and you're feeling the snow completely blanketing you. And luckily we'd had a snow shovel, so we started to corkscrew out a way to get out, and digging in steps to try and get an air bubble. But this fellow who was with me, who's 6'5", he went straight up 90 degrees, couldn't find any way of getting any air. And then eventually with his long lanky hands, it was pushing and pushing, the snow was still soft, and pop, we got out on an angle, dug our way out, dug our way back to the hut. The kids are all there going, what's the big deal? What's your problem? And the next day we'd left a ski pole to mark where the tent was, and it was completely covered, and took 3 hours to dig out the tent. So that wasn't a great moment.
How do you recover from, it's near death, where worst case scenario is going through your mind for a fair period of time, I'd imagine, for probably hours on end. How do you recover from that?
Well, it did take me about 5 years to want to go back and do the trip again. But
Understandably.
But I did do that. Look, I think you learn some things. I think I learned that, you see a lot of those hero movies and you think, oh, I'd be the one that pushes through. Surely you could just get to the top of the mountain, or you'd save that person. But actually, we're all very human. And, the attraction of sitting down in the snow in that darkness, you really do feel that compelling draw to just go, oh, I'll just give up. But I didn't, and the other thing is that nature is bigger than a person, and to give it proper respect.
What's the best thing that's ever happened to you?
Say having my daughter Lucy, who's 16, and we both come from very large families, And we're almost while delighted by being part of a crowd scene in a Roman epic almost when Christmases get together. The other side of that is you kind of feel perhaps we decided that maybe we wouldn't have kids, and then probably in my later 30s we thought, okay, we will. Lucy was born and she's just been a joy and such a delight to see the world through a child's eyes. Yep.
Did you always aspire to be a teacher?
Absolutely. Absolutely wanted to be a teacher. Perhaps my sister, I can be to blame for that. She used to kind of control us when we were about 3 or 4 by playing classroom. She was a couple of years older, and she'd be quick to hit us with a ruler. And I think maybe I was attracted to the sense of power. But all through uni and school, I had wonderful teachers at school, and I thought, I could think of nothing better than to be doing what they're doing.
Would you be happy to see Lucy become a teacher?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Best thing ever. She'd be really good.
On the radar for her at all? Or?
Absolutely. I think I've already worked out what she should be teaching. Yeah, she'd be great.
At what point did you set your sights on becoming a principal?
The very first week I started teaching. I don't know. My dad said that I was born with a managerial gene, one grandfather who I talked about, the Beechworth one, was a very significant war hero and in the First World War, Western Front. The other grandfather on my mother's side was the Deputy Commissioner of Taxation, a very significant bureaucrat. And Dad said, you've got that gene. And as soon as I started in a school, I just thought, this is so awesome. I want to be in the top 5% of all teachers ever, because, if you're going to devote yourself to something, why wouldn't you be the best that you can be? And then, even more powerful, how cool would it be to be in a position where you can make decisions that make the whole thing run amazingly well?
So what drew you to Scots School then, to become principal here? Obviously, it sounds like it was an interesting start for you here. Why Albury? Why the Albury-Wodonga region?
Well, I had most of my career in Melbourne in independent schools, and actually probably never planned to be a leader of an independent school. Would have been happy at any kind of school. But, when I finished university, I had a really good degree. I had a strong honours degree. And the Kennett government at that time weren't hiring teachers. It was a sort of black ban on hiring cutback. But independent schools were still hiring people, and because I had a really good degree, I got a job at Penley and Essendon Grammar. And then you tend to stay in your own sector, in your own system. So most of my career was in Melbourne schools, and then we were looking for a better life as a family. Lucy was about 5, and we thought, where can you take your child and really, expansively enjoy that family life. And we ended up in Canberra. I was deputy principal of Radford College. Lucy went to Radford. My husband worked on the grounds and maintenance team, and he learned how to do cricket pitches and things like that. And so after 5 years of that and working at a high level in that school with 300 staff, with 1,500 students. The school was achieving so well, and my job was to be in charge of all the teachers in terms of the quality of teaching. I thought, well, why couldn't I take that to a new level? So I wanted to do it. Lucy was just on the cusp of finishing primary years, so it was a good time to move. And I said to Lucy, what about if Mum took a job in Melbourne? She goes, oh, no, Mum. No, we'd like a quieter life than that. And I said, well, what about Albury? She said, oh, that'd be great. It's good because we'd always stopped here. We'd love the parks, we'd love the river. But we also really love the region, and I think it's God's own playground. Scots' history is an attraction to me. History is my other subject apart from English. I love the tradition of the school, and I love the opportunity that I was given by the board, which was to reimagine the school. What would be a high quality, contemporary and really relevant school for a place like this? So, you don't have the handcuffs on you that you might have in, say, some of those corporate schools in Melbourne. So it was great to come here.
I'd love to get your thoughts on, particularly I've got 4 young daughters myself, but what are your thoughts on education for women and I guess the flow and impact to society?
Well, I think, Kevin, you'd be well aware of the research that says that, education is pivotal to the outcomes of young girls in terms of their success in life, but also to their children. So if a mother is educated, then the children themselves prosper better. So it has a real cyclical effect that you have to work towards. And I think getting girls to believe in themselves and to not be gender stereotyped and that, these jobs are for girls, or those jobs are only for boys, or I can only achieve like that, is so essential. Yeah. So I think, education for girls and for boys is essential to broadening, their horizons.
As a working mother, Peggy, how do you balance motherhood with your career?
Well, I cheat because I have my child attend a school where I'm the principal. So even today at the swimming sports, I can walk around and ascertain whether she's wearing a hat or not, and whether she's got her drink bottle, and whether she brought her lunch money or not. So it all blends together, and I can see her in assembly, and I can see how she's going. So I am, sneaky cheat. The other thing is I've got a really supportive husband who also works here, and he's sneaky cheat as well, because he can monitor what's happening in the family. Does somebody need to be picked up, or is choir practice being changed? And so we can adjust to that. So we work as a really tight unit, but I couldn't do it on my own. And my husband is like my PA at home.
Good team.
Yep.
So you've been, I guess, renewed for another 5 years here at Scott School in Albury. Whether that sees the end of your time or whether you're here beyond that 5 years, what sort of impact do you hope to have on children, the school, community, and I guess the world at large through your current role as the principal?
Well, we'd really like to stay in the region, and we've just built a really nice house out at Barranduda, which is a sort of testament to our willingness to put down some roots. It is a bit of an unusual thing because, it is a corporate role in some ways, and you are hired by contract. And yes, and I have been reappointed. But, boards change and circumstances change. But we would like to see the school really thrive. I think Albury-Wodonga is an astonishing place, and I've been getting to know principals in the region, and I think closer collaboration between all the school heads for the betterment of young people in the region, and sharing of resources, sharing of practice amongst teachers, breaking down this really artificial divide between Victoria and New South Wales, and understanding that we're facing many of the same things, adolescent and child mental health issues, understanding best practice around how kids interact with technology, having them take safe and healthy risks, helping teachers to become the best they can be and not be on the edges of current practice because they're in a regional setting. All these things are really huge, and for us, we're a boarding school, so we want our students here to be world ready to go out and see the world, but equally we're keen to bring the world in. And increasingly I find people knocking on my door from all over the world saying we're looking for a safe place for our children to enrol, a place with a great program, but also where they can walk the streets on the weekend and play sport. So we're better than Albury-Wodonga.
How does being, and I guess you've done both of these as you mentioned earlier, how does being the leader of a school compare or contrast to being the leader of a business, do you think?
Yeah, look, I love being a leader of a school, and I work with my business manager, Fiona Holmes, and all her career has been in business till now, and she works in a school. And while she's really thrived and really enjoyed that and said it's been an amazing career that she had before coming into a school, she says the purpose and the meaning making that you can do in a school environment is, it's hard to measure. And I would say that I'm a community leader. So while some of my day is a business leader and I'm looking at spreadsheets and business and bottom line and resource management and risk assessment and governance, much more of my day is also talking to kids. How's your day been? What you doing? Who are your friends with now? Did really well in the swimming. And then there's a bit about being the leader of the staff as well. And so, helping them stay in tune to what the whole vision is. So I really enjoy pulling it together, and I tell lots of stories. I have a metaphor for every year, and we've, so one of our metaphors actually, ironically enough, has been being on the journey.
Yeah.
And I said, watch out for false summits. Don't just think it's going to be all sorted, that we're continually on that journey. But we've got great maps, we've got water bottles, we've got really good food with us. We've got really good navigators and we're going to get there. But we'll do it together, not just as individuals.
Yeah, and just make sure you steer clear of the snow-capped summits after you.
That's it. Avoid that.
Well, thank you so much for being on the journey. I thought I'd finish with one last question, which is always interesting to see each individual's response on this. If you could be anywhere in the world tomorrow, no restrictions, don't worry about finances, you can have anyone with you, where would you be? Who would be there with you?
Again, a really tricky question because it's a bit of like what's on your bucket list, but it's also about where would you kind of beam me up, Scotty, where would I be right now? So I've got lots of places on my bucket list, you know, in the UK and Canada and throughout Asia that I'd love to see. New Zealand, stunning. But I actually just think, you know, on a beach, a Victorian coast beach with my family, a towel, a book, maybe my little beach chair, looking at a wave, that would be a really great thing to be, you know, chilling.
Excellent. Peggy May, Principal of Albury Scott School, thanks so much for being part of the journey.
Thanks, Kevin.